We're ready.
Right. So this is the, would you like to introduce the vertical,
Sure,
please?
sure, yes. Today, now Malini Rajendran is going to talk about reimagining our food system and how to get in touch with our food and come back to our connections that we are all looking for. Thank you, Malini.
Thank you, Dr. Sailesh Rao, and thank you for holding this wonderful event. I was in on almost as many sessions as I could stay awake and attend, and they are really amazing. And as a result of my attending the sessions, I decided to do a little bit of a change in what I was going to present today. Uh, I felt that there was a call for amongst all the sessions for actions that could be taken. And I would like to focus on actions that the individual can take. We have now become so disconnected from the impact of our individual choices and the individual actions and decisions that we have taken with respect to our food. And while academics and economists like to look at the global picture, it really doesn't make sense. And we seem to have forgotten that we've landed in this mess because of the cumulative impact of our individual choices. So I chose to look at reimagining our food economy from a perspective of what these economies are on a larger scale. And I would be presenting you with very simple, as an individual, as a small group, as a community, what needs to be done, what can be done, what's easy for you to do, and to move this entire movement forward. So I look at, when I was looking at the economies, I see that, they're roughly into two categories, which is the North American, the Western developed world, and in this I include Australia and New Zealand. And then you have the rest of the world. And in both these food economies, you do have very distinct components of the rural economy in these countries and the urban economies in these countries. And the question is, irrespective of whether these economies are rural or urban, is the food system, is the food currency empowering the local communities, the individual, and giving them self-reliance, or is it making them dependent and consumptive? So I would like to present solutions more than the theory, because the data, the statistics, the theory is easily available. And it's what we tend to hide behind to avoid taking action. So there are three key questions about the food economy that need to be asked by the individual. Where is my food coming from? And I can tell you, if you take 100 people and ask them this question, the answer would be the supermarket or the grocery store. And that's it. This is where the disconnect is happening. And if you ask them, how is it produced? You're lucky if you get an answer other than Nestle or ITC or Walmart or Green whatever or or Pepsi, and the more difficult question is, why is it being produced? Is it being produced because I'm consuming it? Or is it being produced because I've been convinced by advertising that I need to consume it? Or is it being produced because a whole lot of us like eating this stuff, and therefore the economies of scales around that particular product have developed? And why do you consume? It's a tough question. The other thing that most of us don't stop to ask is the cost of food. We bite into an apple, we cut an orange, but we don't really question, when we hold that fruit in our hands, what are the resources that have been used in making this? And how many kilometers has this food traveled? And I think one of the issues of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions is the consumption of hydrocarbon fuel in the transportation of food. Many years ago, some 29 years ago, there was a very young college researcher from Sweden who had done an extensive project on the food kilometer. And I don't know if that research is available. I've been trying to track this gentleman down, not been able to find him, but he had done some work of every gram of food you eat. He actually came up with an economic and a mathematical module to correlate in terms of weight to the kilometers the food has traveled from its consumption and from the point of its production. And also, what is the cost of this food to the planet and to the people who have produced it? At what cost? We so nonchalantly walk into a supermarket and put things into a shopping cart without asking these questions. And these are questions which need to be asked. And the toughest ones are the ethics. Is increased productivity at all costs, the concept of economies of scale, that important? And we often try to push it under the carpet, talking about development and growth and GDP and what have you, without realizing that increased production also encourages wastage. You tend to waste and have least scant respect for things which you don't have to struggle for, and you don't grow yourself. And there is always this question of exports versus starvation. So I would like to use this as the basic template frame for presenting some ideas, concepts, so that the community can actually go out there from the get-go, hit the road running, and start taking action. I would also like to present the idea of a new type of currency. We have to move out of this concept of ideas being IPR and being sold. We don't own anything. The day we realize this, from a spiritual point of view, we don't own a single damn thing. We have right of usership, but definitely not right of ownership. So you don't own the ideas. In any case, as far as I am concerned, every idea that was ever given has come from the divine. So it's not yours. It's come to you at the right time, in the right way, when most needed. And the faster as a human race, we realize this and accept this, the better it is for us. Solutions need to be a currency. Time and effort need to be a currency. There was a very interesting study of someone trying to set up a time bank where you could actually, put in time. Tutoring and mentoring is a currency, but all of this needs to come from a place of love, compassion, and gratitude. If any of these currencies come from the old mindset of I can make money out of this, I'm going to benefit out of this, it's only going to be me, this is my property, we are not going to change the world. Nothing is going to change. We need a new currency from a totally different place. And believe you me, every time you use this currency, you get paid back tenfold. Without a doubt, you get paid back tenfold. So I don't understand where the entire hurry-burry and the rush of climbing the ladder comes from. So let's look at reimagining the food economy. And like you said, Dr. Rao, education, 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 education. That's where we need to go. But I would like to look at your concept of education from a very structured perspective. So what is missing in our school curriculum is addressing these issues at a very seminal level. There need to be school and college real-time projects. So you need to go to your schools, your children's school or the schools if you teach or schools and tell them, can we do a project where we take the kids into the supermarket or we have the kids do a survey or fill up a questionnaire trying to just analyze where the food that they've eaten yesterday or today come from. We have to bring this entire concept closer to the individual, closer to the source, closer to home. Because until and unless you do that, that connect to understand the impact of the choices they are making is not going to be there. And you can do this at a college level because each one of these topics lends itself to academic deep diving, but at the local level. It's very nice and very comfortable to talk about food grown 20,000 miles or 3,000 miles or 400 miles away from the food that you are eating, and forgetting that the food that you are eating also needs to be understood and studied. There was a time some 20 years ago when I was working in a school, and this was all I was doing. I was developing real-time projects for the school using a vertical system where from the 6th standard to the 12th standard, the whole school carried out the same project, which meant that each skill level of each age group addressed each of these questions. So sometime 3 months from now, when I return back home, if anybody would like to get in touch with me, I'm willing to share the templates. You can start a small project in your school and see where it takes you, see the difference that it is, that can be made. And every one of them needs to take a multidisciplinary approach. So when you're looking at where does the food come from, you're bringing in every aspect of the curriculum in there. You're bringing in the economics, you're bringing in the maths and the science, you're bringing in the agriculture, you're bringing in the culture, you're bringing in the social habits of eating. Why in my house do I eat this and in someone else's house do they eat something else? And the sharing that happens when children bring this data together and then decide as a school that this is what we need to do. I can tell you, I've done this and the results are amazing. I mean, you will see exponential growth in the actions you try to take when you take this down to the school and the college level. And you need to have local community engagements in all the events that you do. So you can do this vertically, you can do this horizontally, you can do these projects diagonally, but they need to be done and they're not being done. The other thing is we need to look at using the new currency to address these issues. So if there will be solutions, but they will require time and effort. They will require mentoring by experts. They will require tutoring to see that the projects take off, whatever projects. And new ideas need to come in. And new ideas will come in. In fact, children are some of the most fertile minds because they haven't been spoiled by the limits of education. And to share with you, I've often been asked, are you an engineer? Because I have patents, I design machines. And I said, thank God I'm not an engineering graduate. Otherwise, I would never have thought out of the box. With due apologies to you, Dr. Rao, on that. But the fact is that when you go with a new currency, asking with love, compassion, and gratitude for these suggestions, for these solutions, and you tell these people, we will work with you, you will see magic happen. Now, how many kilometers does your food travel? This has been a very critical question I have been looking at because I was looking at this from a different perspective, from the perspective of waste. I've spent 20 years working in waste management, and I wanted to know how many kilometers does the waste travel? And the reverse of this led me to looking at this, how many kilometers does the food travel? So if I add the kilometers the food travel to the kilometers that waste travels, then, and this was when I was working on trying to get a carbon credit for one of my projects. I mean, it made absolute sense. But none of this is a question this generation, the young generation, especially those of us living in urban metro cities, and now even the level B and the level C cities, need to ask this question. Is it operations of scale that is causing the kilometers to add to the food we eat? Or is it the production process? My understanding is that it is both. It is both the economies of scale and it is the production process. So going back to the education, and I've been an educationist for the last 45 years of my life, and I feel that if we clean it up at that level, it makes life easier for us to work at at a community level, because education is not just what you get in the schools. It's what you do with the local communities. It's what you do with the advocacy. It's what you do with the government. And it's what you do with the policymakers. And a lot of them need a lot of education on issues that most of us are looking at. So I'd like to jump directly into solutions, and do forgive me, these are very simple. They may look oversimplistic, but just try getting them off the ground and you'll know how challenging these simple solutions are. So I'd like to start with the kids in school. Can you start in your school a Grow Our Food plan? And this was a study, a case study of children in a school where they actually converted the entire so-called well-organized, artistically developed landscape area of their school into a growing food garden. And I can tell you, my grandson is 3 and my granddaughter is 7. The wonder on their face when they see a seed sprout and the 2 leaves come out of the soil, and they come running to you saying, there's a brinjal on the tree. And then one will come and say, I saw the flower first. You didn't see the flower. You know, that is the connection our children are missing. And when they start growing the food, 2 things I've noticed. They appreciate the effort and the toil that goes into it, and they don't tend to waste food. And I've also realized when you start teaching children to cook food at a very early age, no matter how small they are, they learn not to waste food. And I can tell you, all the maths that I taught my son was addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, was done cutting the beans, cutting the lady's finger, cutting the brinjal, and adding up the peas in the pod was multiplication. I mean, you know, you work with children we have to move them away from giving them gizmos that disconnects them. Give them the gizmos, but also engage them in this. And my experience with children is they love this activity more than they love the gizmos. They tire of the gizmos. Here, there is that constant sense of wonder and discovery that they have. So if you can go out after my presentation and just talk to 3 parents and say, can we start a Grow Our Own Food plan? Can we talk to the school authorities? I think I've done my job. And I think we've moved that 1 step forward. And this is the school that has completely transformed its regular lawn. It had a beautiful, pristine, well-manicured lawn. And the community and the parents and the kids got together and converted it into a complete vegetable patch, right? See, I appreciate that every place you cannot grow everything that you like to eat that's available in the markets, but it's a start. It is a start. And if we don't make the start, and every time I would again and again go back to currency of time and effort, currency of love and compassion and gratitude. You teach the children that we are on the way to a new earth, a new human. That lovely song video that we saw would come from this. So community agriculture, I would like to really, this is a lecture I present in the classes that I used to do when I used to teach environmental education and organic farming. This is a very old, it's almost, I think, 25, 30 years old YouTube video of a gentleman who started, Jojo Rom, who started setting up because he went through a very bad economic crisis and didn't have money to buy food. He started growing his own food. And and the amount of food he grows is amazing. But what you need to do is when you have surplus, go to your local community and get community engagement in marketing and distribution. And today, with so many phone apps available, it's a done deal. You don't have to set up a marketplace. You just have to set up an app with a group which says, okay, I have so many extras. Either I sell it to you or you have something to give me, you give me in return. Or if you don't have anything to give me in return, this is what it costs. One thing that we don't teach in agriculture or we don't teach in gardening is how to cost the cost of produce. And very often it is skewered. That needs to be taught. And there are very few experts who can actually do the calculation and who need to teach it, but it's learnable. I mean, this is a very intelligent group. And I'm sure if one person steps up to the plate and says, okay, there are certain parameters and we'll work out how to get the cost of produce so that whoever grows, even if it's a hobby, needs to be properly recompensated for the effort and the time, currency that they have put in whatever way that they can be, recompensated for it. And this is again a community initiative which uses a lot of mentoring and tutoring for the children in the group, in the community. And they grow practically everything that the local community tends to eat. I don't see why, when I've never eaten rambutan or I've never eaten durian, it needs to come 3,000 kilometers across to my supermarket and I need to eat it because it's a fad. Eat the traditional seasonal foods that you have been eating for generations. Nature has a way of giving you the right things you need for the right climate, the right conditions. Why are we not doing that? And this can only happen when the individual decides, okay, I'm going to get 10 people together and we're going to start a farm community. You do not need land resources. And I'm going to show you something that sounds really out of the textbook. This is Jojo Ram's, look what he's growing. He's growing onions, he's growing leeks, he's growing garlic. He's growing everything that he traditionally uses in his kitchen, in his cooking. And he doesn't have too much of space. He's learned how to optimize it. And the funny thing is, I show this video to people, not from a gardening perspective, from a waste management recycling perspective, as this is how you can put all those waste bottles and cartons to good use. In fact, in one of the groups we've been talking to recently, a lady in UK, I said, if you can get the whole community together and get one person collect the bottles, the other person puts soil and nutrients together, the third person collects seeds, the fourth person do this, and you just distribute 20 bottles to each house. You've actually hit 3 birds with 1 stone. You've got food going, you've got rid of the waste that would normally just be discarded. And you've given people, especially in this lockdown with so much of worry and trauma about losing jobs and livelihoods, it's all there in that model for them to deal with. So this is the classic, what we see. And this is what can be done and should be done. And the picture on this side is what leads to self-reliant empowerment with health and 0 kilometers. With fires happening all over the place, with natural disasters, with COVID coming up, with resources being stretched to the limit, this is the route to take, and it can be done. And it's easy to do. It's not rocket science. It's not difficult. It just needs that new currency of love, compassion, gratitude, with ideas and solutions and people coming together, coming as a community and working together. I'd like to, talk about urban agriculture. A lot of us have seen buildings like this in different parts of the world. In different parts of the world, we've seen this. And we've seen these very artificially, beautifully landscaped areas. And this was a picture I took yesterday, when I was thinking of what is it I'm going to share with you and show you guys. This is the parking lot of the society next to where I'm staying now with my daughter. They have the entire periphery grown with papayas, and the papayas are in fruit. So you can do it. It's just that you have to think differently. And I would love for people to get the landscape architects, the town planners for a session. Bring them together and tell them, look, guys, in your town planning, please factor this in, because food is going to be something that we are not looking at, but it's the next thing around the corner staring at us. And we can move away from these economies of scale, taking food thousands of kilometers across continents and across the country, if we do this. I'd like to share with you another radical thought. And this is a building, I'm not going to disclose its name because the person whose images I'm going to share of the work that they are doing in their thing, in their house, they requested anonymity and I'm keeping it at that. Now, this is a building in Bombay, in Mahalakshmi, in the center of Bombay. This has 48 floors. And just look at this. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. So is urban agriculture possible? Definitely. You just have to think out of the box. You just have to think with your heart. You think from the heart and solutions will emerge. Now, this is, on the 43rd floor, this is bitter gourd, and I think one of it is flat beans that he's growing. And he's growing it because he wants to teach his children about growing food. He may not get a crop. That's not the point. He's taken that first step. And these are the curry leaves that he's got his children to paint up the bottles and he's hung them up there. These are the spices. So this is balcony 1. This is balcony 2. And he's left enough of space for whatever they need to do. And you can see, I think this is, I don't know, this seems to be either a cauliflower or a brinjal plant coming up here. And this is the 3rd balcony. And this, you can see the height of the balcony and the height of the building, and he's grown some other pots and plants. Now, if every flat actually started growing food, it needs organizing. It's not as simple, but it can be done. You don't need agricultural land. You can grow it in containers. You can meet food security. You can teach your children the value of growing organic, good, natural food themselves. You can bridge that disconnect children are having with the food that they are eating. And it's possible. Not everybody has the luxury of having a backyard or a front yard, and this can become this. It needs to become this. We need to reduce the food kilometers, the food travels. And I would like to talk about seeds, something we don't talk about at all. And seeds that are wasted, that need to be collected. With the fires, the earthquakes, the floods that are happening, seeds are going to be the most precious commodity. And I can tell you, in the years that I used to work with agricultural groups, the vendors would always tell me, ma'am, there is more money in seeds than there is in the actual produce. The seed return on investment on seed is 300 times the return on investment on the produce itself. And that makes, absolute sense. And yet we ignore seeds. I'd like to present to you a very radical concept. We have libraries in schools for keeping books and information. Can we have seed banks in schools? Can we have seed banks in schools? It doesn't have to be this. This is in Mexico, an organization that sets up seed banks, and they've been doing this for 40 years. But can we start with a small seed bank? Start with the concept, and we all know a concept always grows and expands. So where is this? And and when I said this, people asked, where is it going to come from? The children, teach them how to harvest the seeds from the fruits and vegetables they eat. Unfortunately, most of the vegetables are fruits. Technically, the leafy greens and the root greens will not have seeds, but every other vegetable has seeds. So start with that. You do need technical know-how. You do need people to teach you how to protect the seeds, take the seeds, harvest them, dry them, save them, and keep them. You do need to do that. But the idea is we aren't even thinking of this. I know a lot of school authorities are going to get back to me and tell me what kind of a genie did you let out of the bottle. But please, please, these are small things you can do. Start a seed bank at home, start a seed bank in the community. And I can tell you there are numerous websites. Just Google it and look at all the work and reach out to these people, these websites. They all will help and get back to you and show you how to start a community seed bank. Start a community seed bank. And look at this. Look at this. Look at the waste that goes into the bin. It is a resource. Every one of these rotting fruits may be rotten for you to eat, but their seeds are in perfect order. Instead of throwing it out like that, can you harvest the seeds? Every time you squeeze a lime, instead of just tossing the seeds into the bin, harvest the seeds. When you eat an apple, harvest the seeds. And there are enough of YouTube videos on how to take seeds out of the fruits and vegetables you're cooking. So at the individual level, can you get together and have a small workshop with your friends on how to get seeds going? Can you have I want to give you ideas, that you can actually action and take forward and do, not just theory. And these are all doable. Every one of them is doable. I want to share this with you. This is a friend of mine, Marcia, who's 83 years old. And she sent me these images. And I've just pasted the text exactly from. She just took one slice of tomato, depending on which part of the world you are from. And this is what she produced. And she is on the 43rd floor. And she got this from the seeds. So when we look at food and agriculture, we need to remember the seeds. That's where it starts. And we need to teach our children the seeds. Now, I'd like to go to the other part, which is exports versus starvation. And this was classic. Governments have been toppled because of onion prices and artificially created shortage of onions many years ago because all the onion was exported. And is this what operations of scales is about? And it's difficult to find solutions. Fortunately, in India, we have CSR. But the CSR needs to be, I'd like to present a different angle to it. Yes, we do have a law which makes it mandatory, but when I was looking at the data, what I found is food production and processing companies in the list don't figure. Nestle's and ITC's figure, but they are not the only. There are thousands and thousands of food processing units. They don't figure in the CSR. And should the CSR be about just anything, or can we look at sending food to nutritious food? And I talk about this. I'll show you a very interesting image. Nutritious food to distressed areas. Can distribution of surplus production and food be shared with those parts that are starving? And look at this. And we need to move beyond community service and product promotion. Cornitos, as part of their CSR, distributed food during COVID. And guess what they did? They gave all the kids packets of nachos chips. So is your food CSR going to be a product promo, or is it going to be nutritious food? A lot of corporates are doing community work, which is not part of their CSR budget, but which the individual employees are moving out and doing service by distributing food and cooking food. We need to move out of this mindset. We need to go to the corporate and the policy level and ask them, okay, so what are you going to do about the hungry that are in our city, in our state, in our country, in our continent? And when you cross that, then if you still have surplus, Can we send food to those parts of the world where people are starving and hungry? Okay. I'd like to go into increased productivity and wastage. These are the difficult questions I mentioned at the beginning. And although this looks very nice, and although this appears to be redeeming us, that saying, oh, we are not 40%, other countries are 40%, it's still not acceptable in a country where there is so much of poverty and so many people are going hungry. To convert a human tragedy into a statistics like this is the mindset that needs to go. Look at this. This is a scene you would find after every market day or at the back of any marketplace. This is where we can do action at a local level. It doesn't matter which country you are in. It's just that the topography of the wastage and the market looks different. You just go to the back of any supermarket, and I've gone through quite a few supermarkets in the US when I was there on my research project on waste management, and this is the scene you would find in the backyard. So can we work at the local level? Can you form a small group, one brick at a time, one step at a time? Go to your local market, look at this. And you know what I see here? I see seeds being wasted. This is seeds of a crop that can be grown. Now, if I have to distribute, now look at it like this. If I have to distribute 10 seeds to that building in Bombay, which had 288 houses, I would need a whole lot of seeds. So look at the seeds being wasted. And why should seeds be bought? I mean, communities need to get together. You need to have a team that will harvest seeds from this wastage, which will tell them, look, if these fruits are rotting, don't throw them in the garbage bin. We will take them. And, you know, processing this kind of waste is where I did 20 years of research on. There are a huge number of products that can be created, which are value-added, valuable products. And I'm not just talking about compost. I'm talking about real high-end organic agro inputs that comes out of this. You know, tomato waste, I connected a student who was wanting to work on lycopene. And I asked her, would it matter if the quality of the tomato was slightly kind of off? She said, no, ma'am, because we are actually extracting the lycopene. Then I told her, come with me. I took her to the shop, you know, this kind of a market. I took her to the tomato wholesaler and I said, from now on, all the rotten tomatoes that you are putting in this crate, just give it to her free of cost. You are spending money to hire a cart to go and, throw it away. She will come and pick it up. It was a win-win situation. So you can do this. Reach out to universities. What are you looking at researching in? Cabbage. The Institute of Home Economics has done some amazing work in extracting certain nutrients from cabbage, and they're making them into a pill. This was part of the malnutrition campaign research project that they got. So I told them, look, let's go to the market. They reached out to me and said, you know, ma'am, can you tell us where we can get the cabbage free of cost? I said, come, let's go to the market. Let's go to the cabbage vendors and pick up all the cabbage that, you know, that they're chucking. So these are doable solutions. So where do these ideas come from? Love, compassion, and gratitude. These are ideas. We need to bring this currency into effect in every action. And food waste. You know, post-consumption food or post-cooked food is a completely different ballgame. And we need to get back into the schools with an education program. We need to get into communities with an education program. How much food are they wasting? You tell the children that today, for the next 1 week, I want you to weigh the food that you are throwing from your plate on a weighing scale and make a note of it. This is your homework for the week. And you bring that data in and you show it to them. It's not only just food being wasted, it's also their parents' money going down the hatch. And then it is a criminal waste of a natural resource and the use of all the water, the soil, the land, the air, the transportation kilometers that this food took, which is why again and again I go back to those original questions. When we do projects with schools, start with your own house. Take a small weighing scale and put a paper bag and then weigh every day the food that you're chucking. Weigh it and then chuck it and add it up. You'll be shocked. You'll really be shocked. And I'm not adding into this the energy that went into the cooking, the fuel consumption, or the oils and the spices and the time and effort you spent in the kitchen cooking the food. You know, those things we take for granted. So again, the new currency needs to be brought in for this solution. Okay, so I'd like to go back to your 7 points: educate, engage, and act. Simple solutions. Just take one project at a time. Start with the schools, bring in the new currency, and you will have a new food economy. We have to stop thinking of the macro, because we seem to somehow forget that the micro actions have led to the macro mess. So can we reverse? And we cannot reverse it by reversing the macro. We have to reimagine the micro and go back to it. And that's what I have to share with you all for now. I hope I've left you with some action points, because I kept repeatedly hearing Ankit saying that, okay, can we come up with action points? And so I said, okay, let me just focus. It's nice and impressive when one talks statistics and numbers, but it's also what we all hide behind. You know, we forget the me, the I that can make the difference. And that's the connect I would like to give from the heart to all of you today. Thank you.
That was so inspiring, Malini. Thank you so much. You've given us so much to think about. I have one observation that I would like to. I think your presentation is going to spawn a number of projects here at Vegan World 2026. I have a feeling that that's going to happen.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
By the way,
much.
Bill was referring to Kimaya. Kimaya goes to his school.
I figured that out. So I hope, Bill, you will start a seed bank in your school.
That's a good idea. I like that. We never thought of that before. That's a good idea.
Yeah.